In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos postgame reaction podcast brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Ben Grant, joined as always by JB as the Toronto Argonauts clinch first place in the East Division with a 24-23 win over the Montreal Alouettes. And before we get going, JB, I just want to apologize to our listeners that this postgame podcast is coming to you a little late this week. I was a little under the weather and am alive and well, and so we finally get this to you Monday night. But again, apologies for the delay. And JB, let's go through the game. But before we even get to the game, I actually want to play a clip from back in April, because we're right sometimes, we're wrong a lot. And every time that we actually get something right, I like to celebrate it. And so I want to play a clip from our predictions episode way back on April 12th as to how this regular season would end for the Toronto Argonauts. Toronto goes into Montreal, they get that win. I think they clinch first in the East with that win. And then going into week 21, back at BMO against Montreal, I've got that one as a loss because I think they're resting guys.
Yeah, same. Based on what we have, this last game shouldn't matter.
All right, our final tally. So I have the Argos going 11-7. So JB, even a broken clock is right twice a day, and we managed to get that one pretty close. Here we go, coming into the final week of the season. The Argonauts clinched, as way back in April we thought they would, in Montreal, and now they get to rest players coming into this week. So it's just kind of cool to listen back and see that. Now, there's a lot of clips from that episode I am not going to play where we were really, really wrong. It ended how it ended. And so, the Argos currently sitting at 11-6 in a great spot. And it's just such a relief to clinch the game with the second last season. It would have been so stressful heading into this week, knowing that game, like for both teams, obviously it changes things, because now Montreal can kind of step off the gas a little bit too. But it would have been extremely stressful coming into this week, knowing what was hanging in the balance. It wouldn't have helped for East Final ticket sales or anything like that as well. Knowing now exactly what's happening, and if you haven't heard, the East Final tickets are I believe already on sale, and the date is November 13th. And that's a 1:00 start. So that is already wrapped up. That is already available, as I understand it. And excellent that they can now spend a few weeks focusing on what to do with whoever they face in the East Final, and that's going to either be the Hamilton Tiger Cats or the Montreal Alouettes. Again, two teams that the Argos know very well by now. Let's get into this game, JB. Those first few drives, I thought, were hugely important. Remember, Montreal starts the game with a really solid drive. They throw a pick. Toronto ends up with the 2-and-out. Montreal comes storming right back down the field, and they turn it over on downs at the Toronto 1-yard line. Let's just talk about that, because in some ways, that really set the tone for the game. This game could have gone far differently if they score on one or both of those possessions.
Yeah, I'm in favor of aggressive coaching. I don't know what. I know Montreal felt that it was a kitchen sink game and they had to go all out to win, but I don't understand the interception on third down. I don't understand going on third on goal. You're at home, kick 2 field goals. Get the scoring started. I didn't understand either of those calls, to be honest, especially after the other third down turned into an interception. Very, very weird calls. I felt like that was more reckless than it was aggressive. I don't get that at all. I think you want to put points on the board.
I agree with you on the first one. So it was 3rd and 4 on the Toronto 15, and that's where that's where Harris ended up getting picked off by Jonathan Jones. I kick a field goal in that one. 3rd and 4 from the 15. You started off with 3 points. I respect the aggressive play calling. I like it. I'm rarely going to say I hate that move because far too often we see it go the other way where coaches are far too conservative. So when a coach is aggressive, I'll applaud that. I would have kicked a field goal there. The second one, though, I think from the 1 yard line, I just feel like you have to go, and you're Montreal. So, I think you absolutely have to go. I'm not sure why Antwi is your ball carrier in that situation on the 1 yard line. I think I know Dominic Davis has been shut down the last couple of weeks on short yardage, and he was the play before that. He only got a yard, but that Montreal O-line is pretty good. I know they had to change at center, and that did prove to be a little bit of a problem, but I do go for it I just don't think you can kick a field goal from the 1 yard line. So if I were Montreal, I would have kicked the first field goal. Second one, I'd go for it, and maybe you fail. But let's talk about those 2 plays from an Argos point of view. How about Jonathan Jones with that pick at the 10 yard line and then taking it back 40 yards? That was pretty awesome to see.
Amazing. I'll get this off my chest now. I was more than a little irritated by the TSM broadcast, who kept going on and on and on and on the whole game about the 10 points Montreal gave up, as if Montreal forgot the tea in the change room or something. I mean, Toronto was a key component of stopping those plays. It was not wasted points by Montreal. I mean, Toronto just made great plays. So that irritated me to no end that they kept talking about this as blown mistakes, because I thought the Jones pick was fantastic. It was like perfectly played. He fanned out and took away the slant, and game changer.
Now that was a very early challenge that we saw from Montreal, from Coach Machocha, who felt like there was pass interference on that play. How did you see that one?
Well, like we've talked about, there's right, and then there's likely to be overturned.
Right.
And you're right. I think you could argue in a vacuum there was some pass interference, but they're never going to give you that call, because then they would have to call 100 more times in the game. It's just not going to get called as pass interference down in the red zone, and I don't think anybody wants the game called that tight.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and you can't have that. You can't have the game called that tight. And it reminded me, when I saw it, reminded me of the challenge that Coach Dinwiddie made in Edmonton a couple of weeks ago, or last week. I don't even know where we are right now. It was like you said, it's the correct thing, and we've seen pass interference called. We've seen that flag thrown on similar contact, but it's just not a play that is going to get overturned. It was, there was a little grab, a little pull. If there had been a flag on that play, I would have been annoyed by it, but I would have understood it. And had Coach Dinwiddie then challenged the pass interference, it would have stood anyway.
Yeah, for sure. You have to be able to pick the calls that are going to stay as are, right? Like if that had been a flag, they would have left it as a flag. When it wasn't a flag, they're not going to change that. That it just has to be way more drastic to overturn the call on the field.
Let's talk about Jonathan Jones. So it was a great return, but great coverage too. He was all over his guy. He was able to get his head around like a receiver does. He picked that ball. It wasn't a clean catch. He did sort of double clutch it, but then he turned upfield and got 40 yards on that. I actually thought for a moment that he might go, because you can't, on the TV angle that I was watching from, I couldn't see the angle that everyone else had, but. Yeah, what a great return, and they completely stole the momentum there, because had they converted there, I believe Montreal probably goes in and scores just because they have that momentum. But yeah, it was a huge swing. How did you think he played this game? Because it felt to me they went far more with Jones this week than last week, where it was a lot of Jones on first down, Hoyt on second down. I felt like Jones got a lot more time in this game.
Yeah, I thought he played pretty well. He still can get caught on cutbacks and bouncing outside, because he's reading run quickly and he's hitting the middle quickly. But he's a backup linebacker. If your backup linebacker was Wynton McManus, you'd be a pretty ridiculous team. So there's going to be a drop off. But I thought he played well. I thought he was great on the goal line stands to pick, obviously. besides the occasional bounce outside and run, I thought he was great in run. I mean, he's a big, strong guy. I thought he played really well as a backup linebacker. I don't think you could ask much more out of him.
I talked about this a little bit on a piece I wrote for 3 Down Nation. They seem to have, I guess, been able to benefit from some film study on Jones. So going to Edmonton last week, Edmonton didn't really have much on Jones. Some preseason tape, there wasn't really a lot to look at. But then having a full game's worth of tape, you can really see how, I think in this specific example, just looking at one isolated player, because I think it's sometimes difficult for people to understand listening when we talk about how important film study is. And now that there's tape, how is someone going to handle it? We talk about it a lot with quarterbacks. Like now that they've had a few games in the league, let's see how defenses play them, or let's see how a team deals with this offense. How can that affect an individual player? Having a full games tape on Jonathan Jones, how can that affect the way that Montreal goes about attacking him?
Yeah, I mean, you look at how he reacts to run, and I mean, look, he's going to have. You're looking for key or common flaws, and that of course had a linebacker that if you're the backside linebacker, that maybe you're overplaying run, you're overplaying the initial read, you're not scraping well, so that the bounce out or the off tackle run is there. Or the cutback run is there. And I think they saw that if you give him a look like middle run, he is going to hit middle run. The same way, a backup DB might shoot screens all day and never really respect the hitch and go or what have you. So, yeah, I think he fell into that because it's tough out there. I mean, that's the hardest part. I mean, that's why finding a great linebacker is so difficult, because you're asking them to read and process information so quickly, where even 0.5 seconds too long, and now you've got somebody on the second level washing you out, and it's a big run. So kudos to Montreal. I mean, they clearly saw that, and that's going to be hard to fix. I mean, I think you probably only fix that by bringing Wynton McManus back. It's like having a corner and they're like, well, on film, he's not good in one-on-one. Yeah, you're not going to change that in 2 weeks of practice. That's why you have starters and backups. But it is. I mean, kudos to Montreal. Clearly, when you watch the game, they attacked different aspects that Toronto had some issues with.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it shows you how lucky Toronto is to have a player like Wynton McManus and why he's so good, why he should be the defensive player of the year, because he doesn't have those. It's not like there's no film on Wynton McManus. There's film on Wynton McManus. There's film on guys like Enoch Mwamba, but there aren't weaknesses that you're able to exploit week to week where you say, well, we just do this and he can't do that. And that's why they're so special when you have a player like that. And it's not all starters. Like you talk about the difference between starters and backups. Not all starters are like that. You can pick on a lot of starters, but it's really special when you find a player and there's all sorts of tape and coaches are like, I don't know, why don't we run the ball somewhere else?
I really like how, even though he wasn't super great at it, but I love that outside C-gap blitz from Jones as well. I mean, he could have killed that quarterback if he had not paused for a second on the handoff. That I like too. Sometimes you can compensate by, if you're reading, if they're going to run off tackle, well, I'm going to blitz off tackle. And that way, if that's the way you're coming, then we're already here. So maybe you work a little more of that in, because he had a free release. Nobody picked him up, so that's one to keep an eye on for sure.
And I think the Argos, in sort of self-study, they also learn about their own players, guys that they haven't seen in game situations that much. You get to see what they're good at. Maybe it's something that they look at and they're like, hey, you realize how good Jones is at disguising a blitz or timing his rush or whatever it is. Although I will say, when you've got a free release off the edge, I almost want to see a gamble when there's play action there. I almost want to see you just decide, I'm going to annihilate player A or B.
That has to be the read. Like, it's like playing option rules football. If you're the linebacker coming, your read is quarterback, and running back is somebody else's problem.
Yeah, I agree. And so I want to see a player get blown up when you get a free release like that, not you get a free release and then make a decision and then
I
get
know,
in
and
on
then
the
they
play.
did stupid play where he passed it to him and they ran for like 50 yards. I was like, oh my god, that was
Yeah.
such a stupid. That was such a ridiculous play.
Well, instead of going, well, we've got caught up in so much stuff here. We're still in this, I guess, second drive of the game technically. But let's just talk, since you brought it up. Let's talk about that play, and then we'll get back on track here. That was such a frustrating turning point in the game. There were a few sort of momentum issues I felt in this game, and that was one where Trevor Harris was completely wrapped up. And Walter Fletcher he turned around, basically decided that the play was over. He had his hands down at his side. He didn't think there was any way he was getting the ball. And somehow Trevor Harris just kind of flicks it to him. Fletcher reacts quickly, catches the ball, and then runs 50 yards downfield. That was such a terrible turning point in the game. And it's so depressing as a defense to know that you were within, not even just within a second, within like tenths of a second of that being blown dead, or you tackling Harris to the ground, and somehow it not only turns into not a sack, it turns into a 50-yard gain. That was pretty crushing, because you look at, you mentioned this when we were talking about it. You see the passing yards that Montreal was able to produce in this game, chalking up 413 yards. Well, it's because you've got plays like that, 59-yard screenplay to Walter Fletcher. So that's 59 of it right there on what probably should have been a sack, or at best for Montreal, an incomplete pass. And it ends up going for a 59-yard pass. So if you're looking for where these 413 yards came from, some of them came from weird plays like that. All right, let's get back on track here with so after the Jonathan Jones interception, that would have been a perfect time for Toronto to strike. I would have been in favor of one of those, I guess, like sudden change deep shots there. That's what I wanted to see. And we got a pretty conservative 2 play calls as part of that 2 and out, which I didn't want to see from Coach Dinwiddie. And what he's doing, and we've seen this before, we talked about this a few times earlier this season too. Coach Dinwiddie likes to test out different looks early in games. A lot of coaches do. I like to do that as well. That's not unusual for offensive coordinators. But I feel like sometimes he favors testing out a look versus combining testing out a look with also running an efficient play or an attacking play that can get you the ball downfield. I just felt like Montreal was ripe for a deep pass on that play, coming off that momentum swinging interception. I would love to have seen play action to Alouette and then a deep bomb. And I think at worst, it stretches the defense out a little bit. And, if you got an incomplete pass and a second down. Instead, they ended up running on a first down play for 4 yards, which is fine. But really what the plan was, they ran it out of an unusual formation that I haven't seen Toronto run before. And clearly Coach Dinwiddie wanted to see how Montreal responded to that. How are they going to line up when we do this? They ended up not coming back to that play, coming back to that formation. So clearly that wasn't, the look that Montreal gave them wasn't something Toronto felt like they could really take advantage of there. But, stuff like that I do find a little frustrating. And then on the second down pass, as well as Bethel Thompson played, I thought, in this game, that second down pass was terrible. It was a hook to Banks that he threw off his back foot. It bounced to him about 8 yards short. And I thought, oh man, I hope this isn't one of these games for McLeod Bethel Thompson. But he's just so streaky that he can do a few plays like that and then a few minutes later look like a Hall of Famer. So Montreal gets the ball back. They drive all the way down to the 1. Let's talk about that goal line stand that the Argos made. So it's first and goal from the 4. Stanback gets 2 yards. Then they try Dominic Davis on sort of a sneak type play for 1 yard. And then it's that third down run to Antwi. Talk about what a huge effort that was, a huge stand that was by Toronto on Montreal of all teams, who are great at that third down and 1 conversion. That was amazing.
It was. I mean, that's the word for it. Especially, I can't believe they couldn't get in. Really, it's shocking. Full credit to the line and linebackers coming through. We thought Robbie Smith had an amazing close down there. Mwamba, of course, in the middle. It goes to the defensive line. Really, we've talked about it. Toronto has had a really good red zone defense all year. That when they need to bow up, 5 yards and in, they are not now you can convert in the middle of the field, but when it comes down the red zone, they have not been a team that have made it very easy to score on. We've definitely turned a lot of plays into field goals. So that was fantastic to see.
And I love how you mentioned Robbie Smith. It's important that he gets a shout out on that because you don't often see a player on the edge like that impacting a 1 yard middle run. But he completely destroyed his guy. He was lined up with Callender, I think, was at left tackle. And Smith had sort of outside leverage on him, but pushed this, Callender's not a small guy. He's weighing somewhere around the 300-pound mark. And he annihilated him, pushed him into the gap that Antwi was supposed to run into. And Callender was like facing Antwi by the time he got to the gap. Antwi ran right into him. And then Mwamba, who had sort of, he was stacking up the center and the play was sort of off to his right side. He had that split second that was created by Antwi running into his own lineman. He had the wherewithal and the time to be able to now come into the actual gap that Antwi is now looking for. And now he stands up Antwi, and then Kassar comes around the outside and pulls Antwi's legs out from under him to keep that play short. But that's a whole team effort. That's what I loved about that defensive stand. It's everybody on the D-line is doing their part. You've got Hendricks diving, doing sort of the dive and roll into the middle, which really jams things up to begin with. But I think the blame lies with Montreal in not going with a quarterback sneak. I've seen it so many times with Toronto early in the year. We remember the frustration in BC of them handing the ball off deep to Harris on the 1 yard line. It's just got to be something shorter than that. It can't be something that takes any more time than a quarterback sneak, because then you allow things like that to happen. On a quarterback sneak, you can't have the left tackle block up the hole that you're running into. It's just there's not enough time for that to happen. So great play on Toronto's part, but just a weird play call, I thought, on Montreal's part. But they're clearly getting self-conscious about not being able to get it in from the one over the last couple of weeks, which they have been able to do all season. So Toronto finally responds. Their second drive looked a lot better than the first, but it just felt like a lot of the first quarter had gone by before Toronto got an actual drive together. And then it was one of those magic moments where McLeod flipped the switch, where he looked so off and disinterested in that first drive of the game, and then it's Hall of Fame McLeod Bethel Thompson on that second drive. So he goes 5 for 5 on the second drive. Can't miss anybody. Goes down the field with a really nice pass to Gittins Jr. He gets Daniels for a 20-yard gain. Gittins Jr. again for 14 yards. Ouellette has a completed pass in there too, or a complete pass to Ouellette. And then they get down into a 1st and 5 situation. 1st and 5, I don't like for the Argos. That hasn't been a position I've liked all year, because I feel like first and goal from the 5, I don't feel like that's a running situation to me. I feel like you've got to pass twice and then kick a field goal if both are incomplete. And they ran it on 1st down. They got 2 yards out of it, but that's why I don't like running on 1st and goal from the 5, because that's almost always what happens. Unless you get down to the 1, then really you've thrown away that 1st down call. You with me on that strategy? You throw twice from the 5?
I'm not crazy about throwing down there, to be honest. Yeah, I can live with that. I'd rather just run it 3 times.
I hate that. That's what Montreal did. They had 1st and goal for the 4 and ran it 3 times into a wall.
Sneak. I don't know why they were handing the ball off. I didn't understand that.
So you say you get 2 plays to get, basically say also, 2 plays, let's run it down to the 1.
Back. You get the best running back in the CFL. It makes no sense to me at all.
I know, but Toronto doesn't, and they haven't had the same success. Although I will say, as of late, it has changed a lot.
Yeah,
because in this game, Toronto again saw another rushing touchdown, which it's a huge streak now that Toronto has going for rushing touchdowns, and there was also another passing touchdown inside the 25-yard line. So now McLeod Bethel Thompson is is 14 touchdowns to 1 interception inside the opponent's 25-yard line. But they've also got the rushing touchdowns to go along with that, because they've now got, I believe it is now 8 in the last 9 games. They've got rushing touchdowns after not having one to start the year.
It's funny, when it comes down there, I get more conservative. I would say like I'm more like run, pass. If you can't, you get 2 shots at running it in, and if you can't get it in, then your third shot is a pass.
And the passing play they call it, I like. I like getting out on the outside to Ambles. It's just tough to tackle a guy like that in space. Ends up getting in fairly easily for the touchdown. That was nice to see. It wasn't the biggest game we've seen from Ambles, certainly in terms of production. He only had 4 receptions for 18 yards, but that was a huge touchdown for him. I didn't know what to make of the fact that as much as McLeod got a lot of receivers involved, Ambles is usually a high target, high completion guy, like high percentage throws, but 4 receptions on 7 targets, 18 yards, it just wasn't his kind of day. And I looking back and rewatching it didn't really do anything for me. I just didn't see, other than Montreal is very familiar with his style of play, and they were trying to take away a lot of those short routes, those quick outs that Toronto likes to go to, and instead Toronto had some success going downfield. All right, back into our drive chart. We're now into the second quarter. Toronto's leading 7-0. It got kind of dry for a spell there, where nothing went on. It was such a sort of defensive battle. This felt like a playoff game to me, where teams tighten up a little bit. And after that drive from Toronto, I didn't really feel like we saw too much from the Argos. They'd get a first down or 2 and then punt the ball away. Montreal would get a first down and then punt the ball away. But this is where I was starting to get a little worried about special teams, because the more punt returns you give Montreal, the more dangerous it becomes, because it's like Russian roulette. At some point, they're going to take one back big. What did you think of the way that they handled or did not handle Chandler Worthy?
Yeah, okay. I thought we would be better at handling him. I think we've been better in other games. Never let him change the game, so I have to give them a nod for that. He was able to be a factor. Not the deciding factor, but yeah, it was. I mean, that was why, not to jump ahead, but that's why I disagreed with that midfield punt instead of the field goal. Is I didn't feel we had shown that we had Worthy cold to the point where that punt made sense, because then it didn't, because then he ran it back to essentially where the punter was.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, let's talk about that play since you brought it up, and we've obviously don't have a problem with going out of order, since that's been most of the podcast today. So yeah, so situationally, Toronto's on the 40-yard line, looking at a field goal that really would have extended things and put Toronto up by 13 points at that stage. I don't understand this play at all. I think if Toronto is up by multiple scores, you're up by 24 at that point or something like that, then maybe I get it, but I still wouldn't do it. I think if you've got Boris Bede and you are on the other team's 40-yard line, that has to be a field goal attempt. And I know why he punted the ball away. I know why Coach Dinwiddie decided that. There's a number of reasons. Part of it is being burned before in Saskatchewan, the Mario Alford return, but that was on a huge field goal. That was right at the end of the half. That was like a 61-yard attempt, I think it was. This is very different. 47 yards for Boris Bede. To me, this is more a psychological thing. Like, what are you saying to Boris Bede? What are you saying to your kicker and his confidence level when he's getting ready to go out there to kick a 47-yard field goal, and you're like, no, let's punt this? I hate that.
I don't know. I don't know if they thought about the Bede impact. It felt to me, because it came so quickly after the pin and the safety, that there was just this feeling of, well, if we can pin them back on the 5 again, then maybe we get another safety, maybe we get a fumble touchdown. We seem to be dominating the line. And so because it was so close to that in my mind, they were like, well, we got this punter, let's pin them again. And it just, to me, didn't make sense, because the likelihood of pinning them down there perfectly just was not a huge percentage. When you're that close, there's a reason why you don't punt that close. It's really hard to not end up with what happened, which is you get a return and then basically they're within 5 yards of where you punted the ball. Especially with Worthy, who has shown himself to be a top punt returner. I understand the idea of pinning them, but just a little too in love with the punter's ability. He has not been. I know in practice, and they hope he's going to be more of a coffin corner kick guy, but he has not shown that to be the case. And so they kicked it, and it was a big return, and it ended up not costing them the game. But I'm going to give that one a no in my my strategy book.
Yeah, because again, on the 40, like you're saying, they returned it, I believe, all the way to the 45. So they actually lost it. So it's like basically getting a 5-yard sack, going for it on third down. That was the equivalent. That's what happened. What is going to happen when you punt it from the opponent's 40-yard line? Most of the time, it's going to go into the end zone. So most of the time, it's going to end up being a single, which you don't want in this situation because guess where it comes right back out to? The 40. So that's what's going to happen most of the time. And when it doesn't happen, the next most likely thing to happen is that you're going to get a flag for no yards. And it's going to be a 15-yard penalty. And so maybe they catch it at the 5 or the 10. Well, now it's a 15-yard penalty, and they're back out near where you punted it from anyway. And the reason you're going to get no yards is because it's a much shorter punt that you're covering. You're just not used to it the same way. The punt team is not going down there the same way for a moonball 30-yard punt than they are for the 48-yard punt, which is Haggerty's average. They're far more used to that. And so you often get no yards. And instead what happens is that he just didn't kick that cleanly. It was low and got to Worthy quickly with a ton of time for him to take it back, and he took full advantage. So yeah, everything about that decision I did not like at all. All right, getting back on track, the first half ended 7-3, and I think fans of teams that are not the Argonauts and Alouettes may have tuned out at that point, and that was their loss because the second half got really interesting very quickly. Let's talk about how that began. Toronto gets the ball to start the second half, and almost immediately good things start happening for the Argos. Javon Leake with a 50-yard kickoff return. JB, you must have fell off your chair.
No, I mean, Leake has shown real waggle when it comes to kick return. The punt return game is still not anything, but on kick return, he has definitely shown a gear that they didn't have before. So yeah, I mean, it was great to see, and you see in a playoff game how important that is, like how it can absolutely change the tenor of a game. So yeah, it was great to see, and if we could figure out a way to get the kicking blocking to punting, then we'd really be cooking.
I want to point out the difference in what it looks like on a Montreal return versus what it looks like on a Toronto return. And this is still, we've talked about this all season long, but there's just such a good example of it. Montreal is so good, just like Ottawa is so good at kick returns, punt returns. It was such a contrast when you see Worthy catches the ball, and there's 3 or 4 Argos you can see in the picture, and each one of them has a Montreal player engaged with them. And when Leake is catching the ball, there are 3 or 4 Alouettes in the picture, and maybe one of them is engaged, and the other 3 are running free, about to upend Leake. And so, of course, the Toronto returners are not being successful. They just aren't blocking that well. I know we're not talking about postseason and next year's off season for a while now, but if there's one thing they are going to fix for next year, they have got to find and bring in backup players that aren't necessarily known, because these aren't going to be your really expensive guys. These are guys that are great special teams blockers. They need to bring those guys in. I think they made a point of looking to fix an area of concern last year in special teams, which was punt protection. You remember how many punts we saw blocked or almost blocked last year. They did fix that issue. This year, it has got to be finding players that can protect on those returns, that can pick up a block downfield. It's a really difficult thing to do. It's one of the most difficult skills and most underrated skills in football, is being able to block a guy that has so much space. It's not the same as blocking someone on the line. Blocking somebody over a course of 50 yards, a 50-yard run, when they have 65 yards of width to work with, it's really difficult. And so not everybody can do it. Most people can't do it. The Argonauts don't have a lot of guys on their team that can do it, and they need to fix that desperately, because aside from this one return, that was a high for the season. The 50-yard kickoff return that we saw start that third quarter, that was a Toronto high, and it completely set them up. But there needs to be more of that. It can't just happen once a season where you've got to play like that, and it's just starts with the blocking. The very next play, no, it was one play after that. There was an incomplete pass, and then it's the touchdown to Curly Gittens Jr. I want to talk about this play because I'm a little skeptical on this. Curly Gittens Jr. runs a post dig, and McLeod Bethel-Thompson throws it sort of back shoulder behind him. Curly Gittens Jr. makes a great adjustment, turns himself around, and is able to run the final 13 yards into the end zone for the touchdown to put Toronto up 14-3. Was that an intentional back shoulder? I don't see a lot of back shoulders on digs or post dig routes. You see them a lot in go routes.
No.
I don't know if I've ever seen an intentional back shoulder there. Was that a savvy veteran throw, or was that a misfire?
Yeah, I think it was just a great play by the receiver to adjust to the ball. Look, that would be pretty amazing. Usually you don't see back shoulders when the player is running perpendicular to them. I think it was just a little behind him and really great reaction.
Yeah, I think it's just McLeod saying, look, my guy's down there. I just got to give him a chance and throwing him the ball. I don't think it was planned like that. It's just, look, I've got one-on-one with maybe my best receiver, certainly one of the guys I'm most comfortable with. Let's see if Curly can go make a play. And he certainly did. But yeah, I will always defend McLeod Bethel-Thompson. I've been a big fan of his this season. I think he's played great football. They talked on the broadcast about that being a terrific throw. I think that's more a terrific catch from the receiver. And I think where you give Bethel-Thompson credit is trusting his guys to make plays. And that I do give him credit for. But it was a bit of I don't think it was a good throw. I think it was a great catch. So Toronto is in the driver's seat at that point. And then let's talk about that safety. So Montreal adds a field goal, 14-6 at that point, and then we have the safety play. This one, I still don't understand. I've watched this a few times. I don't even really understand the process of how this went down, and I want to explain this to you. So from talking to a few people on the team and from the league, there's disagreement in terms of who reviewed this play or how this was called, and certainly it was not clear on the broadcast. And even still, I didn't understand what happened, and then the announcers just were like, "Oh, and then here we go." I'm like, "What is happening? That was not the call 30 seconds ago." So let's go through Safety Gate and what went down on that play. So the play was a 2nd and 16 play from the Montreal 4. Harris backs up into the end zone. He's under all sorts of pressure from Ja'Gared Davis, and he flicks the ball towards William Stanback. It falls short of Stanback. And the initial call I saw on the field, which was echoed by the public address announcer and by the broadcast, was that they said it was an incomplete pass. Now, I didn't see any referee signal incomplete, but that is the audio I heard. And so I have to trust that the public address announcer and the broadcast team saw somebody waving for an incomplete pass. And then suddenly we see the challenge flag logo or banner up on the screen. And Coach Dinwiddie's talking to officials, and it seems like this is being challenged. And that's what it says still right now on the CFL website. It says that play was reviewed because of a coach's challenge and that it was overturned. So the official scoring of that play is that it was an incomplete pass intended for Stanback and that it was overturned on a review initiated by the Toronto head coach, Coach Dinwiddie. And they instead called it a sack by Ja'Gared Davis for a safety. this doesn't make, there's something wrong here because there's no chance that that's a sack. If that's a sack, it means, unless there was an early whistle that we didn't hear, and I think that's the only way out of this where that could be a sack, because he clearly lets go of the ball well before he's brought to the ground. I'm not even sure he ever was brought to the ground, but he throws that pass out, and it's not even a fumble because he very clearly has a grip on the football as he flicks it towards Stanback. And we talked about the play earlier, that 59-yard screen pass or whatever that ridiculousness was to Walter Fletcher. How is that play any different than this play, JB?
It's true. It seems to, if I were to guess, because I know I was yelling at my television, as I'm wont to do, the league, in its attempt to protect quarterbacks, and if you touch a quarterback or say a mean word toward them, then that's going to be a roughing the passer. They're going to have to adapt and start calling plays dead when quarterbacks are in the grasp. Because if you don't want quarterbacks pile drive to the ground, then you're going to have to call plays dead faster. Because if you're going to let a quarterback who's in the grasp throw a ball, get rid of a ball, whatever, yada, 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 then you can't penalize the defender for pile driving the quarterback. So my guess is, on some level, the league understands that, and while they're not openly calling it yet, that is what they would like to see. They would like to see more in the grasp whistles.
But then I want to hear a whistle. I went back trying to hear.
Referees didn't. I think that's where, I think centrally they haven't maybe made this order to referees yet, but centrally that's what they would like to see. They would like to see referees blow plays dead faster, which I think is fair. You have to call the whistle in the grasp if you're going to penalize defensive ends for throwing quarterbacks to the ground. You can't have both. So he was clearly in the grasp. That has to be a whistle. I felt like they were overruling the referees. That was my take anyway.
Yeah, I get that too. But then how about an explanation? Like, well, how about a referee coming out and explaining?
They don't want to. This is a secret rule change.
Because I feel sorry for the broadcast crew at that point, because they were in the dark like we were, and they're trying, it's their job to explain it, and they're probably looking at each other like, you have any idea what happened on that play? Because I don't, and we're relying on them for that, and they can't possibly know because no one explained it. No referee came out and said, here's what happened. And I don't care how referees word it, but give us an explanation. Tell us why suddenly there's a safety on the board, and why Toronto is now suddenly up 16-6. So then, JB, that we get to that controversial moment we talked about before, the punt, and this is where momentum really swung. It's 16-6, Toronto punts from Montreal's 40, Worthy returns it, and now Montreal has all the momentum. They score a touchdown pass to Winicky to make it 16-13. Then they get a field goal to make it 16-all. And now there's 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Toronto hasn't done anything offensively for a while now. And Bethel Thompson does one of his switch flicks and goes on fire again, has another perfect drive, completing every single pass as he leads the Argos downfield for like a 75-yard touchdown drive. And it ends with a QB sneak from Chad Kelly for the touchdown. That was an impressive response. And again, another reason, it wasn't his best day statistically, it was fine. But another reason you look at McLeod Bethel Thompson as having changed. This is not what I would have expected to see from Bethel Thompson even last year, but certainly not in 2019. And you're getting that time and time again. When the Argos absolutely need a drive, they need someone to make a play, they need someone on offense to step up, he delivers. And what can you say? A perfect drive all the way downfield, ending in a touchdown with the game on the line, and they march it in with 2:23 left in the fourth quarter. It's 23-16. And the way the Argos defense was playing at that point, I thought the game was over. I didn't think there was any way Montreal was going to come down the field and score a touchdown with 2 minutes left. And I imagine you've got to be on the same boat.
No, I did not have that same level of confidence. Just that's how the CFL goes, and I have seen too many hurry-up offenses be able to push the ball on the Argos. I wasn't sure Montreal was going to score, but I felt like there was a decent shot they were going to score. They had moved the ball pretty efficiently the entire game in the air.
Yeah, but Toronto's defense just doesn't let up that many touchdowns. And especially if you're going to have to take the whole field to do it. I just didn't see that happening. And remember, it was 2nd and 18 at one point, and they were able to convert. And even the touchdown came on a 3rd and 4 play where Lewis just got free. Lewis is tough to cover, man. He's got to be, if he's not the best receiver in the CFL, he's top 3.
Yeah, they got beaten. I mean, they didn't get beaten, but in essence, on those plays, they were beaten by a star. That sideline catch when he went up and got it, the double move to get into the end zone. I mean, sometimes the star beats you. You know.
Can I rant one more time? Can I rant one more time about zone coverage inside the 10-yard line?
Yep.
It wasn't on that play. I think on that play they actually were in man and he was just able to shake him. But they did it on the earlier touchdown. They were again in zone coverage down there. Why, JB? You're a defensive coordinator. Tell me why on earth a team would want to play zone that close to the end zone.
You feel that you can't stay with anyone. That's all I can. That's all I can really see is you just feel like your guys cannot keep up with any of the other teams. But I know some people love that the zone defense down there. To me, there's only one thing that can go wrong when you play man, and there's 4 things that can go wrong when you play zone. The Heineke touchdown was a classic example of a bust. Like, I'm just pro man. And if a guy gets beat, a guy gets beat. Like, if your guy shakes you, double the best receiver, and then if everybody else gets shaken, then you get shaken. But I can't stand watching busts where a guy catches the ball and there's not an Argo within 8 yards of him. Just go man down there. I just think it's the better call.
And then Montreal's big mistake was leaving 30 seconds on the clock for the Argos. And again, hats off to McLeod Bethel-Thompson. He goes 3 for 3, gets Toronto down to the Montreal 41-yard line. In 25 seconds, it took him to do that. And they set up for the game-winning field goal. Let's talk about this one for a little bit because I want to defend Boris Bede on this field goal miss. So he misses the 47-yard field goal. He misses it just to the right, kind of like he missed that first kick. It looked the same to me. It just drifted to the right. This one, I completely excuse him for because of the situation. It's the last play of regulation. He is, above all else, trying to kick that through the end zone. Yes, he wants to actually hit the field goal, but he knows a single point wins it, and he's got to kick it 61 yards to get it out the back of the end zone, and he kicked it exactly 61 yards. So I give him the pass on that. I know people say, well, that's choking under pressure or whatever. In the Canadian Football League game, on the last play, when you only need a single point, the priority is length, not accuracy. And so he just booted it as hard as he could. You're hoping it goes through. That'd be great. But if it misses, you're just hoping it has the distance to get out, and it did. So I forgive him for that miss.
Yeah, same. He just missed, and he clearly was given a little extra gas to make sure it went out the back. I agree with you. I think that's perfectly fine.
And he got enough height on it where it was going to go over the uprights too. There was no chance of it hitting the upright because that would also be a kiss of death if it hits the uprights because now it's a dead ball and we're going to overtime. But yeah, that's completely the right move. So anyone that's upset at Boris Bede's missed field goal attempt at the end, it really wasn't a missed field goal. And I did have some people asking about why don't you just punt in that situation? Far lower percentage. The odds of, because you need a 61-yard punt.
Yeah, no.
To get that ruse. That's not the play. That's not what you want to do. So you've got to kick it through.
It was a good kick. It was good situational kicking.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you had the Montreal penalty for too many men on the field. That was a little bit of a bonus because if Bede hadn't gotten that out the back of the end zone, they would have been able to kick again. But they didn't need to because they got the single point because Worthy was standing on the back of the end zone when he caught that ball. So it was immediately blown dead. As soon as Worthy touched it, he's out of bounds. That's automatically a single. So they declined the penalty. Huge win. JB, let's talk about players of the game. There's a lot to go around here. I have a feeling we might be settling on the same people, though. Starting defensively, I think we both have to be saying Enoch Mwamba on this.
Yeah, Mwamba. probably his best game as an Argo. Obviously, he's fired up to play in Montreal. He was all over the place. He had that amazing blitz. I love seeing him come in that A-gap blitz. He almost had a pick in a pass breakup. Middle run. He was solid. Goal line stands. He was absolutely the tone setter for that defense out there.
Yeah, his energy was unreal. I haven't seen him like that because he's for the style of play that he features, he's actually a pretty calm guy. And he did not look like that in this game. He was fired up. You saw just the opening play of the game when he knocked Stanback to the ground. He stood over him and flexed. And I don't think I've ever seen Enoch Mwamba do that. That's not his style. But he was just so jacked up to win this game. And when I saw that play, I thought, okay, this is a team leader that is not going to let his team lose today. And you got a couple guys playing like that, and it's going to be a win. So that was great to see. Yeah, I'm with him for defensive player of the game too. 9 tackles. Quarterback sack, a tip pass that almost led to a pick, like you said, and almost got a pick himself. That was a huge game from him. A lot of other players played well. I thought it was a really nice game from Sean Oakman too, but I think we have to give it to Enoch Mwamba. Offensive player of the game. This is a little tougher. Looking at some of the stats, like Bethel Thompson played pretty well. 69% completions, 240 yards isn't huge, but it's good. 2 touchdowns. Ouellette had a nice game, 14 carries for 92 yards, averaging 6.6. Where are you going for offensive player?
Yeah, both those guys were good. I guess to kind of change it up, I thought Curly Gittens Jr. Was terrific. He kind of took the reign of the number one receiver and was vital in their drives. I thought he was their best receiver. And look, I loved Ouellette. I think I gave it to Ouellette last game. I thought he played great, and he's made himself a starting running back, which is amazing. But I'm going to give it to Curly Gittens this time.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. 7 catches on 8 targets, 117 yards and a touchdown. That's a huge performance.
Yeah.
7 of 8. That's so big. If you're catching 7 of 8 targets, you're doing something right, and it just speaks to the relationship between he and Bethel Thompson. So yeah, that was a massive game from Curly Gittens Jr. and they needed a receiver to step up. He was the guy, because the next leading receiver was DeVaris Daniels with 3 catches for 51. So huge game from Curly Gittens Jr. I'm going to go a little bit off script here for our player of the game on offense. I'm going to give it to the entire offensive line. I know that's cheating a little bit. It's not one guy. It's really tough to pick one guy. I will say I continue to be impressed with Ryan Hunter since he has started in Toronto. Since he started playing in Toronto. So that Calgary game where he first had his debut, basically at the end of the first quarter, if you count these games, these 4 games since, Toronto is averaging over 6 yards a carry since then. It's a massive number. And for them to be doing this in 4 consecutive games against 4 different teams suggests very strongly that he has made a difference. It happened to coincide with the arrival of Hunter. Now, looking at this game specifically, it's not just him. The whole offensive line played very well. They kept McLeod Bethel Thompson clean for the most part. They were run blocking extremely well. Bethel Thompson had a lot of time to throw. They made everything happen. So Bethel Thompson's good game, Curly Gittens Jr.'s good game, AJ Ouellette's good game. All of that comes back to the offensive line playing one of their best games of the season. I think this probably was their best game of the season. So the entire offensive line gets my offensive player of the game. And where are you going for play of the game, JB?
As mad as it might be, I think the Jones interception changed the entire direction of that game. Montreal comes down, they score first. Crowd is going bonkers. You don't want to play that on the road. All the ghosts of all those losses in Montreal start coming back. Just changed the whole feeling of the game. For the defense, you get that feeling of you don't get pushed off the field on that opening drive. I think that opening pick absolutely changed the game.
Yeah, that was huge, and mine's really similar. I'm going with the third down stuff on the Toronto 1 yard line. Same thing. It could have sent the game in a whole different direction. Montreal would love to have been in front because they're a run first team. They're a very dangerous run first team. If Montreal can build up a lead and then throw Antwi and Stanback and Fletcher at you repeatedly for the entire second half, Toronto was in trouble if that was the situation. And that 3rd and 1 was huge. Toronto was able to bounce back with that 109-yard touchdown drive from Bethel Thompson to take a 7-0 lead. That was the swing. That was huge. And I know Montreal tied it up again late, but this would have been a very different ball game if Montreal goes up 7-0. Well, that will just about do it for us on this post-game reaction, several days late post-game reaction podcast. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.